I just heard Danielle, Jensen, and Vikings, and I was like, I'm in. I've never felt more on top of the world than when I finished the Magic Treehouse book number 1. The best audiobook I've listened to in a very long time. Consistent, I guess, would be the word for this month. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about my December reads, the final month of 2024. And it is 2025 right now, so Happy New Year. I hope that you guys all had an amazing end to 2024 and an amazing beginning to 2025. Hopefully you've already read some good books this year so far, fingers crossed. And so today, to recap my December reads, as always, I will be using the Caw Pile method. I will link the creator of the Caw Pile method below, as always. And then in one of her videos, you can find a link to download a spreadsheet, a Google Docs spreadsheet specifically, so that you can track all of your reading in a single year using the Caw Pile method. It's like the most amazing book tracker spreadsheet I have ever seen, and she gives it for free. And so I would highly recommend checking it out if you would prefer to track your books on your own with this specific method versus using something like Goodreads, Storygraph, Fable, whatever. And that is what I use to track my books personally. I like Goodreads more than any other apps. I know people are always like, Goodreads sucks and you should try other ones. And I've tried Storygraph and I've tried Fable, but I just always come back to Goodreads. I just prefer it more. There's a way wider selection, especially regarding books in foreign languages on Goodreads versus any other services out there. And until they catch up in that regard, just don't see myself switching, because I do like to track all the books that I'm reading in my different languages, in English and Spanish and German, and then hopefully one day more languages, we'll see. And so I do just always go back to Goodreads. I'm sorry. But I just really don't like certain things about Goodreads, and I feel like they don't track things that well, and I prefer my own rating system, especially when I talk about books on my channel at the end of the month. So that's why I use the Caw Pile method, and that's why I use the spreadsheets. And I will put on the screen over here so that you can see exactly what the Caw Pile method is. Each letter of the word stands for something different. And then you can also see my number system right here. So if I say like a C, the character's got a 7, that is specifically what this means to me. And then I will also put my smut meter here because I do also mention how much smut was in a book along with my Caw Pile rating, and then what star rating I gave it overall on Goodreads. So this is what my smut meter is specifically. I don't read smut, so it's probably a lot lower than other people. So when I say like a 2 or a 3 for you, it might just be a 1 or even a 0. So check it out if you're interested. And then without further ado, I will jump into it. Just to briefly recap what I read this month, I read 11 books, which I'm kind of shocked about because I felt like I wasn't reading that much and I didn't have much time, but some of them were novellas. Specifically, it was 1 children's book, which was incredibly short. It was 1 middle grade book, 1 short story, 3 novellas, 4 actual full-size novels, and then 1 nonfiction book / miscellaneous. You'll see later what I'm talking about. And some of the genres that they were tagged in as Goodreads was fantasy, romantasy, science fiction, time travel. Those ones are new for me. African futurism, religion, Christianity specifically, mystery, 2 Christmas books, mythology, fae, etc. So let's jump right in, and then you can match up these tags with the books and figure out which ones they were pertaining to. To start off with the first book that I read in December, I read A Fate Inked in Blood, which is book number 1 in the Fate Inked in Blood series by Danielle Jensen. And I will put the description on the screen very briefly. Pause it if you want to read about it. Basically, it's about Vikings. And it is a magical fantasy take on Vikings where they're blessed by these god powers. And I found it really interesting. I didn't realize it would be so heavy on magic. I don't really know what I was expecting. I didn't read too much about it. I just heard Danielle Jensen and Vikings and I was like, I'm in. Absolutely 100% I'm going to read that. And so I was not really researching this book much before I actually ended up reading it. And in a way, I'm kind of happy because it pleasantly surprised me. And I feel like maybe if I would have heard about it beforehand, I would have placed expectations on it. But I think going in with no expectations was nice. I feel like a lot of people do not like this book, but I actually really did like it. As you can see, I gave it 4 stars overall, and it was just a solid even 4 stars. Not 4.5 rounded down or 3.5 rounded up, but just a flat 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's not the best book on the planet. It's not a masterpiece. I feel like Danielle Jensen kind of drives me crazy sometimes with her writing style. I feel like she can be really modern and vulgar when talking about smut specifically, and I don't like that. However, despite all of that, I did really enjoy the book. And like I said, the magical element just really took me by surprise, and I ended up really enjoying it. And I think it was really fun to see these different people blessed by all of these different gods, and then like what their powers were and what they're supposed to do in this world, like what their point of being is and what they're expected to do. And then to see the main character Freya and to see all these expectations put on her because of these powers. And then the romance between her and Bjorn, I just really liked also. Also, I listened to the audiobook, and I can highly recommend it. The best audiobook I've listened to in a very long time. Definitely top 5 audiobooks I've ever listened to in my entire life. The narrator, I don't know if she was truly Scandinavian or if she was just putting on a Scandinavian accent to my American ears. It sounded like a really good accent. I know a lot of Scandinavian people, and I feel like that's genuinely what they sound like. I feel like it was authentic, but I don't know. But it was so immersive. It was like the coolest audiobook experience ever. Just like all of the words being pronounced to my ears properly and all of the names, and then just constantly the Scandinavian accent. I could see how potentially maybe that would annoy some people, but I loved it. I think it was so immersive, and it just was so much fun. Like, it's the most fun I've had listening to an audiobook in a really long time. So if you're gonna read this book and you don't mind listening to a Scandinavian accent for like 12 hours, however long the book was, I don't know, then I cannot recommend the audiobook enough. It was so flipping cool. I loved it. And about the ratings, you can see that all of them were really high. The highest rating was atmosphere, and that's just because it was set in Scandinavia, like in a mythological kind of retelling of Scandinavia, I guess, not necessarily like real Scandinavia. And this was not like a real Viking book. Like, it's not very accurate to how the Vikings were. I don't really care. I just loved it so much. It doesn't really matter to me, but if it matters to you, this is not very accurate or authentic. So just so you know, be wary. But I really liked it. I thought the atmosphere was great. The writing was just a little bit lower than everything else because of what I mentioned. Danielle's writing, especially with smut, is just not my favorite. And this book was pretty smutty. It's not the worst I've read, that's for sure, but also I don't read smut very often. So it's definitely up there for me. I gave it a 3 because things were pretty explicit. It wasn't a super big plot point and it wasn't super frequent, but it was pretty explicit when it was there, just so you know. And then the second book that I read was Dinosaurs at Sunrise. I think that's what it is in English. In Spanish, it's Dinosaurios al atardecer, which is the Magic Treehouse series, book number 1 by Mary Pope Osborn. This was the children's book that I read, and I read it in Spanish. I don't think I would read it in English again. I read them when I was a kid, but because I was reading it in Spanish, it was actually a really good experience. I'm not gonna rate it, as you can see on the side, because it's a children's book. It was like 68 pages or something crazy, like so incredibly short. And I've already read it when I was a kid. It like formed my entire childhood. Like that and Goosebumps were just like the top 2 that I would take everywhere with me. I would read them in school. I got in trouble all the time because I constantly had a book under my desk and was never paying attention. And it was always the Magic Treehouse or Goosebumps. The Magic Treehouse series was like such a huge part of my childhood and just my life as a kid and everything. I just loved it so much. And so I decided to read some of them, like the best ones, the ones of topics that I'm most interested in Spanish, because my Spanish level needs a little bit of work. It's like intermediate roughly, and these books are so easy to understand. It took me like, I don't even know, maybe an hour or 2 to get through it, which for me, finishing a book in Spanish in an hour or 2, I don't even care if it's 68 pages, life-changing, incredible. Like, I've never felt more on top of the world than when I finished the Magic Treehouse book number 1. And I just think it was perfect for language learning. I can highly recommend it to you if you're learning any language at all. If you could manage to find these in your language, so worth it. They're so simple to understand. It's repetitive. It's very straightforward. It's about magic, but it's not like crazy magic or anything, like as you saw by the description on the screen, which, by the way, I'll just do that for all of the books, flash it, so pause it if you want to read about it. But as you saw on the description, if you paused it, you can go back now if you want. It's like magic, but it's not anything crazy. It's not like high fantasy or anything. It's just that they're transported back in time. Then they explore the world at that time, and that's it. And so it might be dinosaurs, or it might be ninjas, was one that I loved when I was a kid. There's a Viking one, there's pirates, there's like so many different fun things. And so it has like a little bit of a magical touch to it, but it's really not that magic based. And so the vocabulary for the most part is pretty easy, and it's pretty easy for you to figure out what is happening without being too confused because it's too fantastical or anything. So yeah, I really liked it. Highly recommend it for language learning specifically. Otherwise, I don't know if I would recommend it to an adult, but you can definitely read it to your kids. I'm sure that they would love it. Next up, I read book 1 and book 2 in a series, so I'm just going to talk about them together. This was actually a reread. The second time in a single year that I read these 2 books. Never in my life have I read 2 books closer together than these books, like a reread closer together specifically. I am just floored that I had the desire to, and that when I started reading it, it wasn't just boring to me, because it was like maybe 5 or 6 months after I read it the first time, I decided to read it again. And it's because I got a special deal of these books for audiobooks on Chirp. And so I got all 6 books in the series for $6.99. And I had intended to just start from book 3 and continue on. But then I thought, why don't I just read all of them from the beginning? And like I said, I thought I was going to get bored of it. I thought I was going to listen to 30 minutes of book 1 and be like, this is so boring. I already know what happens. I just read this, and then move on. But I didn't. I got so invested, and I read book 1 for the second time in 2024 in like a day, maybe 2 days. And I loved it even more than I loved it the first time. And the same with the second book. It just was so good. And it's just my favorite duology, like within a series of all time. And I say duology within a series because it's a specific couple for book 1 and book 2. And then book 3 and book 4 is a specific couple. And then 5 and 6 is a specific couple. And so I call it a duology within a series. It's technically not. It's a whole arc going across 6 books. But I really only care about Lisa and Kyrian, and I just love them so much, and I love these books so much, and it's one of my favorite romantasy duologies I've read in a very long time. I think it's so stinking good. Also, you already saw, but I only put the description for book 1 on the screen because I don't want to show you the description for book 2 because it kind of spoils what happens in book 1. And I never really do that on my channel. If I'm talking about a sequel, then I'll always put the description or talk about the description for the first book in the series because I feel like it gets so spoilery as the series goes on, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, so I just put the first one. If you want to know what the second book is about, you can look it up on Goodreads, but I don't recommend looking it up until you finish the first one because it's going to spoil things for you. So anyways, that was that. I'm not going to rate them or anything because this was a reread and the second time this year. If you look on my channel, you can find the video actually where I read them for the first time and where I talked about reading them for the first time, and then you can hear my more in-depth thoughts. But that's all I'm going to say about it now. I loved it, of course. And then the next book that I read was a short story, a very short story. I think maybe 70 pages, maybe not even that much, maybe only 50. And it's Wyvern Queen, a Legends of Abreia short story. And technically within the Legends of Abreia series, it would be like book 2.5. It takes place basically immediately after the second book ends, and it's just like a little continuation of Lisa and Kyrian's story, and it's really sweet. I did not rate it because it's so short, and I just don't feel justified in giving it like a full caw pile rating. That just seems so crazy to me. It seems so intense, and it was so short, but it was short and sweet, very to the point, and it just like ties up the strings in book 2. It's not like there were any loose strings, so to speak, but if you were wondering what happens after book 2 ends, then this definitely answers that question for you, and it was just really sweet. Then the next book that I read, I don't know, saying book seems a little bit weird to me, but it was the Holy Bible, and I just wanted to include it because I did finish it in December. I read the Bible every year, the whole thing all the way through, and I read the ESV version. I almost always read the ESV version because it's my favorite. It's kind of like where I like on the scale. I'll put like an image, but there is a scale of all the different translations, and I personally just really like where ESV is on the scale. It's not too not literal. I can't remember the word right now. I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. I just, that's where I like it on the scale. And so I almost always read that. And this year I read it on the Bible app all the way through. I did a Bible reading plan, and it was from the Bible Project. And I'm absolutely doing that again this year. I already am. I just loved it so much. I believe the one that I read was The One Story That Leads to Jesus. Maybe I'll put it on the screen, and I'll also link it below if you want to check out the YouVersion Bible app. And if you want to read the plan, because I loved it so much, it was the best Bible plan I've read in my entire life, because they have all these really fun videos talking about all the different topics and summarizing every single book that you read. I also didn't rate this because it doesn't really make any sense to me to rate it. I don't know. 5 out of 5. But continuing on, the next fictional book that I read was This Is How You Lose the Time War by, I'm so sorry, I'm probably going to butcher these names, Amal, El-Mohtar, and Max Gladstone. I'm so sorry if I pronounced Amal's name incorrectly, but this is such a unique book. It's very strange, and I had a hard time processing it and putting my thoughts together and thinking, how do I actually feel about this book? It took me a really long time to decide on a rating for it and to kind of just sit afterwards after reading it and take it in. It's sci-fi and time travel, which are two genres that I genuinely really do not like. I don't know what it is. I just really don't like books that are futuristic, I guess. I feel like most of the time I don't end up enjoying them, and I just find them a little bit too weird or hard to follow, etc. I don't know. It's just a personal thing. I'm just not the biggest fan of that genre. And so right off the bat, I was not the biggest fan of the plot. And I will say that this book absolutely kind of just reiterated for me that I really do not like sci-fi. As you can see, I ended up giving it 4 stars, so I did enjoy it. However, I didn't enjoy it because it was sci-fi or time travel. That definitely detracted away from it. It was despite that I loved it, I would say. And I loved it because the writing is so unique and interesting. It is such a poetic book. I had a friend on Goodreads who read this, and she gave it 3 stars, and her only review was word salad. And I think that's actually really accurate. I do think it's a little bit of a word salad. Sometimes it feels like it was so poetic just to be so poetic, if that makes any sense. Like, it was just trying really, really, really hard to be the most beautiful, complexly written piece of literature that you've read all year. And so sometimes it was kind of annoying, and it felt like it was a little bit too much, a little bit too try hard perhaps. However, overall, I do think it was really beautiful. And I think it was maybe after the 50% mark. It's a novella, so it's pretty darn short, but 50% really is not that much. And I feel like it was once I was over the 50% mark and I had kind of gotten used to the way that it was written, and I had really gotten a grasp on the plot, because it took me a little bit of time. And then at that point in time, I was like, actually, I really, really like this. And then with every chapter I read, I liked it more and more. And I listened to the audiobook actually. So every section that I listened to, I really liked the audiobook with the 2 different voices for red and blue. And overall, I just think it was a really creative, really interesting, unique book. And it's so short, I feel like anybody should give it a try just to see. I would highly recommend, if you do read it, to at least get to the 50% mark before you decide if you want to actually put it down or if you want to continue, because I was ready to put it down multiple times. And I'm really happy I didn't, especially getting to the end, because the end was just so good and really sweet and romantic. It just was so good. You can see by my ratings, honestly, all of them were pretty high except for Atmosphere, and the only reason Atmosphere was lower than the rest is because I just genuinely hate sci-fi, actually. I'm sorry, I just really don't like it, and I really don't like time travel, and it was just really chaotic in the beginning, and I didn't know what was happening, and so that's the only reason why it was a little bit lower. But despite that, I still really liked it. And then next up is The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter, and I just really love that title. I feel like it summarizes the book so well. It was a Christmas mystery thriller crime novel with romance in it as well. And I didn't think I would like it as much as I did, and I really did like it. That was another one where I ended up giving it 4 stars, and just an even 4 stars. I even thought about 4.5, rounding down to 4. I think in the end I just kept it at a flat 4. But I really, really, really liked it. You can see, again, all of the ratings are really consistently high. The only one that is any less than an 8 is The Logic. And that's just because sometimes I feel like they made such annoying decisions, which I feel like is in every mystery thriller kind of book, and also in most romance books. It just was a miscommunication trope sometimes, and I just wish that they would have just communicated properly. I wish they would have taken better decisions. And also, I don't know, the people in the house were kind of just really annoying sometimes, and I feel like also made really annoying, dumb decisions that made me want to rip my hair out. And so for that reason, it's a 7.5. However, it was not enough for me to dislike the book or detract away from the book in any way, shape, or form. It just was a little bit annoying, but it was fine and easily overlooked by everything else. It just was such a cozy, fun, warm winter read that I just really enjoyed. And it was just really perfect for that time of year when I read it in December. I think if you're gonna read it, you could read it any time of year you want, of course. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend reading it only in December. I just feel like that's just so perfect, and this book was made to be read in December. There was snow, and it was cozy, and it was cold, and then there was like a power outage, and it was romantic, and it just was so nice. I think as far as mystery crime novels go, I've really not read that many, but this definitely was one of my favorites because it didn't take itself too seriously. And it was not like it was super difficult to figure out what was happening, but it also was not super easy. And it had that little romantic aspect to it, which I really liked. It just was fun. And then next up, I read The Deep by River Solomon. This is also another novella. I did not like this one as much as I liked any of the other books that I read this year. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars and then rounding up to 4. Because Goodreads does not allow you to give half-star ratings, which drives me so crazy. But I overall liked this, and I'm happy that I read it. I definitely don't regret the time I spent listening to it, actually, because I really had to listen to it because it's read by Daveed Diggs, who is the singer of the song that inspired this book. And it's so fascinating, like the whole idea of women, like pregnant slaves who were thrown overboard, and then their children turning into mer people is so fascinating to me and really, really, really interesting. And the song is really interesting, and the book I just feel like also was so fascinating. But I did have some qualms with it. There were just a lot of parts that I think were really confusing. I didn't really like the main character that much. I feel like she was very selfish in general, and I totally get why she was. It's no wonder that she was. But I just feel like for being 35 or however old she was in this book, it was a little bit too much and a little bit too childish for me. And again, I do understand why. But I just really did not connect with her as a character at all. And when the majority of the book is following her and it's such a short book and you're not connecting to the main character, then I just feel like there's not much of a chance for that to be considered like a really good book in your mind then at that point in time. I just feel like it's kind of over for that book then. Not over as in like it's garbage and I don't want to read it. It's just like it's over for it to be a highlight of the year or anything. And it was pretty early on that I just felt like I really don't like her as a character and I'm just not connecting. And so then for the whole entire rest of the book, it was kind of difficult because I just didn't really care about her parts at all. But then when it would be parts about other people, it would be so confusing to me, especially on audiobook, and especially because I was listening to it on Spotify, and so I couldn't go back because Spotify gives you 15 hours of audiobook listening per month. And if you go back, that takes away from your 15 hours. And 15 hours really is not that much. That's like one decent sized book or like 2 small books, and that's it. And so I really tried to save that as much as possible. And so I didn't want to go back. But my gosh, though, there were so many times where I felt like I really should have gone back because there were so many different pronouns for the characters. But then sometimes they would have their own pronouns and then somebody else would refer to them as a completely different title and pronoun and everything. And I was just having trouble tracking everything. And when you're listening to an audiobook and you can't go back, you have one chance and that's it. And if you didn't get it, too bad. And I just feel like the novella at certain parts was like moving full speed ahead because there was so much information and so much history being crammed into it. And so I feel like I kind of got lost a little bit. But again, it's because I was listening to it on Spotify and I didn't want to go back. So it's the decisions that I made that led to me being more lost than usual. I think if I was reading it as an actual book in front of me, I would have been less lost. Overall, I do think it was nice. I think the idea of it and the takeaway that you get from it is really, really, really beautiful. I think it was beautifully written in a lot of different ways, and a lot of different sections were really, really nice and really beautifully written, and I really enjoyed. And I really liked the audiobook, listening to David Diggs reading it. I thought that was very immersive and fun, and just like a nice little touch to have the person who wrote the song that inspired the book to be reading the audiobook, and so it felt more special to me. In general, I would still probably recommend it to most people just to try out to see how you feel about it. I feel like with this one, not like This Is How We Lose the Time War, where I feel like you have to get to the 50% before you can really decide. With this one, I feel like you have a pretty good idea early on if you're gonna like it or not, because I feel like it's pretty consistent throughout the whole book with like that vibe and feeling. And so if you don't like it from the first 15% or so, I don't think that you would like the rest. It's so short, I feel like it's worth giving it a try anyways, just to see how you feel. And then next up, I read Spectacular, which is Caraval, book 3.5. This is another novella. This was like the month of novellas for me. I don't know why, because I normally don't read novellas or short stories at all. And this month, I don't know, my library was just like, here, like you've been waiting in line for 3 months. This is your time now. And it just kept doing that for all of these books. And so I just happened to get all of them at the very end of the year. I'm not complaining though, because especially with this one, I did enjoy it. I also ended up giving it just a flat even 4 stars, which I feel like was kind of the theme for this month. I didn't have anything that was particularly high other than perhaps my reread of The Faceless Mage and The Unseen Heir, but I also didn't have anything that was super low. The lowest was The Deep by River Solomon, and that was 3.5 rounded up to 4, so that's not even really that low. So it was kind of just like a very middle of the road month, maybe upper middle road. But Spectacular was really good. It was another winter themed book, and it's very heavily winter themed. I wish it was a little bit more winter themed though. I thought that it was going to be more of the 2 couples, Legend, Entella, and Julian, and Scarlet, just living their lives together, like the 4 of them in winter. But actually it's really only about Legend and Tella, which was really disappointing at first. But then once I got over it, then I actually really ended up liking it. And I will say it made me like them more as a couple, like quite a bit more actually. It's not that I didn't like them before, but I just definitely liked Scarlet and Julian so much more than Legend and Tella. And then I read this book and I was like, actually, they're kind of maybe even in my mind because I just really like Legend and Tella so much. And as you can see by my ratings, it's just all 7s and 8s, just like very on point for this month, like very consistent, I guess would be the word for this month. That's okay, because it was consistently good. It was consistently books that I liked, and especially this one, it was consistently sweet throughout the entire book. There were like a couple of scenes where it was less sweet. If you've read it, you know what I mean? Where I was like, why is this in here and why is this happening? Like, is this what we think it is, or is this something else? And so there were a couple scenes like that. However, overall, I did really enjoy it, and I just think the ending, like the full ending to it, was a really sweet ending to the book. I wish we would have gotten more. I wish it was longer. I wish Julian and Scarlet were featured more in it, but I'm quite happy with it overall. And also the cover is just so beautiful. I just have to say that. And then finally, the last book that I read this month was another book in Spanish, and it was the only book that I actually had a goal of finishing this month. My only reading goal for 2024, not this month, but for the entire year of 2024, was to finish Harry Potter Book 1 in Spanish. And I finished it, I believe, on the very last day of the year, December 31st, around 4 or 5 p.m. So it was quite late. But I finished it, and really that's the only thing that I care about. I don't care if I finished it 2 minutes before midnight. As long as I did it, I'm happy. And I also don't have a rating for this because this was a reread. I've read the first Harry Potter book in English and German and now Spanish. And so I'm not going to rate it because I've read it so many times. And again, it has like that kind of nostalgia film on top of it where I feel like I'm not seeing it accurately because I read it when I was super young, and so in my eyes it's just fantastic and I just love it so much. But maybe that's not really reality. It's just because I happened to read it when I was young, and so it has like that warm place in my heart. I just generally don't really rate rereads. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It just feels strange to me, and so I'm not going to rate it. And I'm also not really going to talk about it much more because you have heard about Harry Potter before for sure. Like, it does not matter what country you're in. It does not matter what your age is. It does not matter what your gender is. It does not matter anything. The only thing that matters is, are you alive? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, for sure you've heard about Harry Potter. For sure you've read the books or watched the movies or at least seen video clips from it or screenshots from them or whatever. Like, there's no way you've gotten to be at the age where you can watch a YouTube video and have not heard about Harry Potter. So really the only thing I'm going to say about it is just that I liked it. I think I got a lot more out of it when I was reading it in Spanish. And I also feel like this is another good book for language learners, but it's definitely, obviously, because it's middle grade, a much higher level than the Magic Treehouse series. I definitely think you have to be at a B2 level before you start reading Harry Potter, but I think it's not too bad though. Like, the words are more magical than the Magic Treehouse book, and so you're gonna have to learn words like wand and wizard in general and like potions and curses, like all these specialty words you're gonna have to learn. But once you learn them, it's really not that hard. And I read it on my Kindle, so I had the Google Translate feature, Wikipedia, the dictionary. I had a Spanish dictionary and a Spanish-English dictionary. And so it was very easy for me to read it on my Kindle. It just took me so long because I just was dragging my feet. But I really liked it. I can highly recommend it to anyone who is a B2 level in a language. I feel like it definitely helps, and it's definitely a fun way to get your language level up to close to C1. I don't know. That's my goal with Spanish. We'll see how long it takes me. And this next year, I have the goal of reading now 6 books in Spanish total, if not ideally 12. I read 2 this year, both of them this month. And so I'm kind of really hoping that I can continue with the Harry Potter series next year and then also read some other books. But we will see. And that sums up everything that I read in December, which is my final update for everything that I read in 2024 in general. I will be uploading very soon, like once this is uploaded within the week or 2 after this, then some recaps of the entire year and everything that I have read and my favorite books of the year and yada, 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 all those things. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. But if you want to see right now immediately any thoughts about any specific books or series that I've read in the past, then you can always just search my channel for my monthly recaps, and then you can see everything since I started my channel this year, like roughly in the middle of the year. All of the ones before I'm sorry, I didn't make any recaps for them. But I will be talking about them in my yearly recap, so you can keep an eye out for that if you are interested. And that is everything. I hope, as I mentioned before, that you have read some amazing books so far in 2025. Or if not, I hope you're just having an amazing 2025 in general. I hope you have an amazing reading week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.